I knew something was wrong the moment I woke up and realized the cabin door was wide open, because I was absolutely certain I had locked it myself. At first I thought maybe I'd just forgotten. Maybe the cold air seeping inside had pulled me out of sleep and made everything feel more dramatic than it really was. But then I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. Bare feet. Human. Wet from the forest floor. And they didn't lead inside. They led out, as if whoever had been standing at the doorway had only watched me, then walked away. I sat upright in the dark, my pulse thudding so loud I could hear it echoing off the wooden walls. My phone was dead. The lantern was out. And every shadow in that cabin felt alive, twitching like it breathed with me. Something had been there. Something had stood just a few feet from where I slept, watching me long enough for the night air to turn freezing inside the room. My first thought wasn't to run. It wasn't to scream. It was one horrifying question. If someone opened the door, how long had they been inside before that? My blanket was pushed slightly off the mattress. The window latch was hanging loose. And the chair I had placed against the front door as a makeshift barricade was tilted. Not knocked down, just moved. Like someone had tried not to wake me. My throat tightened. Someone had stood in the cabin. Close enough to touch me. Close enough to hear me breathe. But the strangest thing, the single detail that paralyzed me the most, was the smell. A faint, earthy metallic scent. Like wet soil mixed with rust. It wasn't here when I went to sleep. But now it lingered in the air, heavy, as if whoever stood by the bed carried the forest with them. The wind outside shifted, and the trees groaned like they were warning me. I could see the silhouette of the forest through the open door, black, endless, too still. No movement. No sound. Not even the usual rustle of leaves. As if the entire woods was holding its breath, waiting. My mind raced. Was it a person? An animal? Something else? But the footprints, those were unmistakably human. Human but not right. The toes were long. Too long. And the stride was uneven, dragging like it limped or crawled. Why would someone barefoot be wandering out here in the freezing dark? And why come into my cabin? Only to leave without taking anything. I forced myself to stand, but as soon as my foot touched the floor, I felt it, cold moisture. A smear. Like something had been dripping. A trail leading from the bed to the door. Something had stood over me. Something had moved around the cabin. Something had left. But the most terrifying thought hit me when I noticed the footprints stopped a few feet away from the porch. They didn't continue into the woods. They just ended. As if whatever was standing there never walked away, it simply disappeared. My name is Daniel Reyes, and for most of my life, I've been the opposite of an outdoors person. I grew up in the city. Sirens, traffic, neon signs, and the kind of constant noise that becomes a second heartbeat. But after months of nonstop overtime, deadlines, and an apartment that felt smaller every day, I hit a breaking point. So when my coworker mentioned a secluded cabin deep in the northern woods, a place with no neighbors, no cell service, no traffic, I jumped at the chance. A weekend alone. Silence. Fresh air. My mind needed it more than I realized. I arrived just before sunset on a Friday. The sky was painted in warm reds and faded golds, and the forest looked like something out of a postcard. Tall pines surrounded the narrow dirt road like guardians, and when I stepped out of my car, the first thing that hit me was the quiet. A kind of quiet you never hear in the city. No engines. No voices. Just the soft whistle of wind slipping through branches. The cabin itself was small but comfortable. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and a single bedroom with a window that looked out toward the tree line. Nothing fancy, but it felt like exactly what I needed. The sort of place you go to breathe again. After unpacking my bag, I brewed a cup of coffee and sat on the cabin's porch. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. I could see the fading sunlight bouncing off the lake just a few minutes away, turning it into a sheet of pale gold. I remember thinking, this is perfect. Exactly what I needed. By the time night settled in, I felt more relaxed than I had in months. No emails. No notifications. No pressure. Just the crackle of the fireplace and the slow simmering calm of solitude. Around 10 p.m. I made myself dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta from a can, and settled into bed with a paperback thriller. Ironically, I always liked reading scary stories when I felt safe. The cabin gave me that kind of comfort. It was warm, quiet, cocooned by darkness but not in a threatening way. More like the forest was holding me, shielding me from the outside world. When I finally closed the book and turned off the lantern, I lay there in the dark, listening to the soft, rhythmic chirping of crickets outside the window. It was peaceful. So peaceful I didn't even notice when my breathing slowed, when my thoughts drifted, when sleep pulled me under. Everything felt normal, stable, safe. The last thing I remember thinking before I fully drifted off was how grateful I was to be away from everything. The noise, the chaos, the crowds. I didn't know that the silence I found so comforting was the exact thing that would make what happened next so much worse. Because in the middle of nowhere, no one hears you when something steps inside your cabin, you said. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. Not with a jolt, not with fear. Just an odd, quiet awareness that something felt different. The kind of feeling you get when a dream ends too abruptly, or when the silence in a room shifts in a way you can't explain. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the soft gray glow filtering in from the moonlight outside. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The crackling fireplace embers had dimmed into a faint red glow. The wooden walls creaked occasionally as they settled from the nighttime cold. The forest outside hummed with crickets. But something wasn't right. It wasn't a sound at first, it was the lack of one. The rhythm of the night had changed. There was a subtle heaviness in the air. The kind that makes your instincts tune themselves sharper, even when your mind can't put a finger on why. I lay still listening. A soft tapping echoed somewhere outside. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow intermittent tap, like a loose branch nudged by the breeze. At least that's what I told myself. But the trees weren't moving. The air felt still. Too still. I rolled onto my side, pulling the blanket closer. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Not a branch. Not the wind. Something more deliberate. Like someone testing the outside wall of the cabin with a finger. A mild chill worked its way down my spine. I tried to shake it off. Old cabin, old forest, of course I'd hear strange noises. But when I sat up, I noticed something else. The air inside the cabin felt colder than before, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in only a few minutes. My breath wasn't visible, but the cold felt unnatural, creeping beneath my clothes. I turned my head toward the window, half expecting to see frost, but instead I saw the curtains gently sway. A breeze? But the window was closed. I frowned and kicked my legs over the side of the bed, trying to ignore the growing pressure in my chest. It wasn't full fear, not yet. Just that uncomfortable suspicion that eyes were on me, watching from somewhere unseen. When I stood, the floorboards let out a long, soft groan under my weight. And then, everything went dead silent outside. The crickets, the wind, the forest, just gone. As if the whole world had paused to listen. Okay, relax, I whispered to myself, rubbing the back of my neck. I walked toward the window and pressed my ear to the glass. Nothing. The woods were still, suffocatingly quiet. Then faintly from the far corner of the cabin, another sound. Not tapping this time. More like a slow scrape. Something brushing lightly against the wall. My heartbeat quickened and I stepped back from the window. A prickling sensation crawled across my skin. The undeniable sense of being observed. I scanned the cabin, everything looked the same. Neat. Still. Safe. But I couldn't shake it. That feeling. Like something just out of sight was waiting for me to make a mistake. I told myself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just the isolation. But deep down I knew the night had shifted. Something was out there. And it knew exactly where I was. The scraping along the outside wall stopped as suddenly as it started. For a second, the silence felt almost heavier than the noise itself. Thick, suffocating, like the air had solidified around me. I stood frozen in the middle of the cabin, every muscle tight, every instinct screaming at me to stay still. Then came the sound that changed everything. A slow, deliberate footstep right outside the window. Not an animal. Not the wind. Something bipedal. Human. Or at least shaped like one. My breath caught in my throat as the soft crunch of leaves moved past the window, circling toward the front of the cabin. Each step was unhurried, patient, almost measuring, like whatever was out there knew I was listening. And it wanted me to hear. The atmosphere inside the cabin shifted instantly. The warmth from the dying embers felt like it was sucked out of the air, replaced by a cold pressure that settled against my skin and spine. I could feel something outside, not just moving but focusing on me. I backed away until my calves hit the edge of the bed. Then thump. Something hit the front door. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to announce its presence. My chest tightened, and I clamped a hand over my mouth to quiet my breathing. The door's old wooden frame rattled softly from the impact. Dust drifted from the ceiling. I stared at the door, expecting another thump, but instead something far worse happened. The doorknob began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. As if the thing on the other side wasn't forcing entry, it was trying to open it quietly. A wave of dread washed through me so violently my knees nearly buckled. Someone was trying to come in. Someone who did not knock. Someone who was not lost or asking for help. The knob twisted again. I stumbled backward, reaching blindly for anything, my phone, a weapon, the lantern, but my hands found nothing. My phone was dead, the lantern out. The fireplace barely glowed. The doorknob stopped. A silence followed. A horrible, calculating silence. Then a new sound began, something dragging across the porch. Not footsteps this time. Something heavier. Wet. Leaving streaks. And then, through the narrow crack beneath the door, a shadow moved. Long, distorted. Not shaped like a normal person's. My throat tightened. No, no. The shadow paused as if it heard me. Then it slowly stretched farther across the wooden floor, as if leaning closer, as if whatever was outside was lowering its head toward the gap to look inside. Instinct took over. I grabbed the bedroom doorframe, ready to sprint inside and barricade myself, but before I could move, a sound shook me to my core. A deep inhale from the other side of the cabin door. Not normal breathing. Not human. Wet. Ragged. As if its throat was filled with dirt and water. It was smelling for me. And in that moment, with absolute clarity, I understood. This was not someone lost in the woods. This was not a wanderer or hiker. This thing wasn't curious. It was hunting. And it had found me. The creature inhaled again, slow, scraping, wet. And that sound snapped something inside me. I bolted. Not a careful step. Not a quiet move. I ran. I sprinted into the bedroom and slammed the door behind me, twisting the cheap wooden lock with shaking fingers. It clicked, but it felt like locking a bathroom door during a hurricane, useless. The moment the lock slid into place, something slammed against the front door of the cabin. Boom. Dust rained from the ceiling. Another hit. Another. Each one harder. The cabin shuddered like it was being punched by something far larger than any person should be. My heart pounded against my ribs as I shoved the small dresser in front of the bedroom door, nearly tipping it over in my panic. I grabbed the only thing I could use as a weapon, a metal fireplace poker I'd brought in earlier, and backed into the corner. The front door cracked. A splintering snap echoed through the cabin. No, please no. I whispered, barely able to breathe. Crack. The door frame gave way. Would split. The latch tore free. Then came the sound I'll never forget. A slow dragging step entering the cabin. Wet. Heavy. Followed by another. The creature was inside. I could hear it sniffing the air, deep guttural inhalations like it was tasting my scent. My vision blurred with panic. The bedroom door rattled as I pressed myself harder into the corner. Then tap. A fingertip. Tapping the bedroom doorknob. Tap. 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 Slow. Mocking. Like it was enjoying the hunt. The doorknob twisted. I held my breath. The lock held barely. The creature pushed harder. The wood groaned, then began to crack. I choked on air, gripping the poker so tight my fingers burned. Then the creature stopped. Silence. I didn't trust it. I didn't move. The creature inhaled. A deep sucking breath that rattled the floorboards. It knew exactly where I was. I had only one chance. I grabbed the only thing in the room that wasn't bolted down, the nightstand, and hurled it through the bedroom window. Smash. Glass exploded outward into the cold night. The creature screeched, a horrible wet shriek, and lunged at the bedroom door, slamming into it with a force that nearly tore it off the hinges. I didn't wait. I dove through the shattered window, glass cutting my arms, my hands, my knees. I hit the ground hard, scraping across the dirt, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. Behind me, boom. The bedroom door split open. I ran. I sprinted into the trees, branches whipping my face, rocks slicing into my feet, lungs burning. Behind me, something huge crashed through the cabin wall, splintering wood like paper. Its footsteps thundered after me. Rapid, uneven, dragging one leg. But fast. Too fast. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I ran until the forest blurred, until my chest felt like it would collapse, until I saw the lake appear through the trees, silver and moonlit. I dove behind a fallen log near the water's edge, forcing myself to stay silent. The forest shook behind me. Then, everything went still. The creature had stopped running, but it hadn't gone back. It was standing somewhere in the trees, listening, breathing, searching for me in the darkness. I stayed behind that fallen log for what felt like hours, my body shaking uncontrollably, my breath shallow and broken. The forest eventually settled into an eerie stillness. No footsteps, no breathing, no snapping branches, just the soft ripple of the lake and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I told myself not to move yet, not until I was sure it was gone. But the problem was, I didn't know what gone sounded like for a thing like that. Eventually, when my arms went numb and my teeth started chattering from the cold, I pushed myself up slowly, using the log as support. The moonlight spilled across the lake, soft and silver, reflecting a calmness that felt fake, like the forest was pretending nothing had happened. I stayed low, edging around the treeline until I found the narrow path that led back toward the main road. Every few seconds I stopped and listened. Nothing. No growls. No footsteps. No heavy breathing. Just silence. Too much silence. When I finally reached the road, my heart nearly collapsed with relief. It looked exactly the way it always did. Empty, quiet, completely unaware that something monstrous had roamed just yards away. My car was still parked on the gravel shoulder where I'd left it earlier. Unlocked. Untouched. Like nothing had ever chased me through the trees. I got in and slammed the door, locking it 6 times before I even started the engine. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel. For a long moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Just stared at the dark line of the forest, half expecting something to step out. But nothing did. I drove. Slowly at first. Then faster. And faster. Until the cabin, the lake, and the trees were nothing but shrinking shadows behind me. By the time I reached the nearest town, dawn was bleeding into the sky. The world felt normal again. Cars passing, people jogging, a bus stopping for commuters. I felt insane. Like I had dreamed the whole thing. Except for the cuts on my arms, the dirt under my nails, the glass still lodged in my hair. I pulled over at a gas station and ran to the bathroom sink, splashing water on my face. When I finally looked in the mirror, I froze. There were streaks of mud on my shirt. But not normal mud. Long, narrow smears like fingers had grabbed me while I ran. I didn't remember that. I drove straight to a ranger station and told them a man had broken into my cabin. I didn't mention anything else. They searched the area later that morning. They found nothing. No footprints. No broken cabin wall. No shredded door. No sign of a struggle. Not even the glass from the window I broke. They said maybe I was tired, dehydrated, imagining things. But I know what I saw. What chased me? What touched me? And later that night, when I finally got home, I found something else. Something that made my blood run cold. Mud. Long, narrow smears of it. On my front porch. Fresh. As if something had followed me. Or was letting me know it still could. And sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I swear I hear breathing on the other side of my bedroom door.